Welcome to episode 206 of the Grip Strip Podcast, the Clash at the Super Bowl edition of the Grip Strip Podcast. My name is Philip Matthew. I'm your host and a nervous San Francisco 49ers fan leading up to said Super Bowl. And I'm here, as always, with my co-host, the iRacing Indy 500 champion, computer genius, a gentleman and a scholar. And his name is Josh Fine. What's going on, man?
I'm doing great, Phil. Of course, Super Bowl week, and glad to see one of our teams in the Super Bowl, of course. But what a season it's been, and now we have the San Francisco 49ers here in the Super Bowl, so it's going to be exciting to see them play, of course. But a huge F1 move just happened this past weekend, of course, and got everybody talking here, even people that don't even watch F1 and everything. So. That was a very, very exciting news, and just so happens that they're also in red, just like the San Francisco 49ers.
And the Kansas City Chiefs, so all the conspiracy theorists about the colors were wrong on that one. The red of Maranello, the Tifosi, it will include me, when Lewis Hamilton turns 40 next year, he will be a Ferrari driver. Something that probably nobody ever thought would happen, but it is happening. He will drive at least 2 years, so he'll be driving into his age 41. He'll drive at age 41, which is, considering Fred Alonso keeps on going, it's not all that out of the realm, but for Lewis Hamilton to make this move at this point in his career after all the years he has spent with Mercedes, it's enormous. We'll definitely talk about that, of course. We will also talk about Andretti Global getting denied by the FOM for a spot on the F1 grid. We will recap Dennis Hamlin's win at the Coliseum. It was a Toyota benefit, honestly, and which isn't too surprising considering MTJ won it last year. But new body styles, they had to go and basically think on their feet. NASCAR actually made a decent call for once. The announcing wasn't bad, but the camera shooting and the producing and directing was still terrible. Per Fox. We'll get into all of those things. We'll also preview the Super Bowl 58. We have some interesting news that's come out today in Formula One and also elsewhere. Josh will let us know all things going on in the world of iRacing and gaming in the sim segment, and then we'll call it a day. So, yeah. The biggest story in Formula One in many years, the greatest driver, arguably the greatest driver in the history of Formula One, making a move that Ayrton Senna wanted to make but never got the chance to, a move that Michael Schumacher made, but he was in the prime of his career, and they were in a rebuilding phase. You think about the people who have went to Ferrari, whether in a lot of cases they've either been on the back end of their career, which obviously that is for Lewis as well, but there's something different about this in that Lewis is highly motivated to make this work and also to go, and he honestly believes that an 8th world championship is possible. With the new formula coming in 2026, he must know John Elkann, who was the guy that convinced him to come to Ferrari. Not just the fact that he's going to get an ambassadorship and all these other things that come with being the number one driver, pseudo number one driver at Ferrari. It's one of the craziest things I've seen in a long time. I didn't buy it. I really didn't buy it for half a day. And then as it got into the afternoon and more stuff started coming out, I'm like, holy crap, it actually is going to happen. And the way that Toto Wolff seemed to be about it and the way Mercedes handled things, I think we're better off that way, because Mercedes wasn't serious about keeping Lewis Hamilton. They were only giving him a 1-year deal with an option for a second after he's driven for Mercedes since he aged 13. And I mean, he should be able to kind of ask for whatever he wants. But the excuse supposedly for why Mercedes reneged on that same deal that he signed with Ferrari is because they were worried that he was going to pull a Nico Rosberg. And the difference is Lewis Hamilton has balls. So he wasn't going to go and just hoodwink Mercedes. I think if he was really going to go and pull the plug, he would be working in behind the scenes to try to get somebody there. But I mean, the fact that Lewis Hamilton's going to Ferrari is absolutely insane. Him and Charles Leclerc are going to be a solid driver combination. Unlike what he has with George Russell right now, Charles Leclerc doesn't have a problem with speed. That's never been an issue from the moment he's been in Formula One, and even prior to that. His ability to finish races and close races, and the amount of mistakes he makes, that's where Charles Leclerc needs that help. And also the fact that Ferrari does not seem, the quality control side in multiple areas is lacking. Lewis Hamilton's been through it with 2 big organizations. Now he's going to a third. It's a totally different vibe, of course, at Ferrari, but the reality of the world is he's Lewis Hamilton. I mean, Alan Prost has been there. I mean, his mentor, the reason why Lewis Hamilton's at actual Mercedes is Niki Lauda, the late Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda did his best work in Ferraris, was outspoken in how bad some of the Ferraris were, at least initially in his time there. He goes and he gets to follow that path. You know, Alan Prost was there, Nigel Mansell was there. You think about guys like Gerhard Berger had a couple of stints at Ferrari, and was a McLaren driver in between that. I mean, the who's who, Mario Andretti, which of course we'll talk about Andretti here in a little bit, but you name it, they more or less, the vast majority of people have driven a Ferrari in Formula One. And if there's one team that everyone says they really want to drive for, if they get that chance, this is the one. And Josh, I mean, didn't buy it, but it's true. It's at least a 2-year deal to drive in Formula One. It's a multi-year deal with a bunch of other stuff going on. And my hope personally is not just that he keeps on driving in Formula One, and he has a chance with a team that wants to support him, but also he'll get to go to Le Mans and drive a Ferrari, which, of course, this past year, Ferrari won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, their return as a factory effort for the first time in decades. So there's a lot of good things that can come from this partnership before we get anywhere near it actually taking place.
Yeah, definitely there's going to be a lot of good things that can come out of this partnership with Lewis. And you mentioned with Charles Leclerc and the effect that it'll have on him. And I would agree with you that he's had trouble finishing races, and I think that's really a Ferrari problem, not necessarily a Charles Leclerc problem. But you know, with Lewis joining, I think it'll give him a lot of mentorship that he probably needs, that maybe he hasn't received yet. You know, kind of similar in the way to how when Lewis came on, he was mentored to a degree with Fernando Alonso, and later on with Jenson Button and everybody else at McLaren up until he went on to Mercedes. So definitely it's going to be a standard bearer for a few years for Charles Leclerc there. And then for Lewis, it's going to be a chance with the team that we think is possibly on the uprise here up against Red Bull. It's going to give him a chance to prove that he can get an eighth world championship in this new era of Formula One since the regulations changed 2 seasons ago. Of course, in that time, Mercedes slowed down a lot compared to where they were. Lewis hasn't had a win since before the race, before he lost the 2021 title, or when it was taken away from him, however you want to view that. But Lewis obviously feels that this is the move that he needs to make, and it's one more challenge that he can have in his career. And I think like you said, every great F1 driver wants to race in Ferrari. I think Ferrari is obviously synonymous with Formula One here, and for Ferrari, it makes a lot of sense. They can get a star driver that can possibly win a title here instantly, or relatively quickly for them. So that's also a good thing for them. And then you mentioned with possibly going to Le Mans, could happen post F1 for Lewis if he decides to go beyond that. Although I feel like Lewis might be the guy that once he hangs it up in F1, he might be done, period. We'll see. But yeah, just a shock move all around. I mentioned earlier that even non-F1 people were talking about this, or casual F1 people, talking to friends, talking to coworkers about it. I was mentioning, like, one friend asked me to explain it into NBA terms, and I was like, well, I guess it would be like, when LeBron went to the Lakers or something like that, a team that's historically had success and all that. It'd be like if he had a year left to play on the Cavs, but still went and signed with the Lakers for the following season or something like that. So something like that, I guess. Or and the reason why they had to announce it now is because obviously they found an opportunity to do it and everything. And it's even if they signed the deal now and didn't announce it until later, like, it's very hard to keep that under wraps and everything, and people find out very quickly what the rumors are and what everything is. It would be hard to keep it a secret, of course. And why announce it now? Well, I mean, there's still a season left, and obviously they can't get out of it now. It's very hard. Everything's already tied up, but they can go ahead and make that preparation. I guess gives a final send off to Lewis in the Mercedes colors, and then also for Carlos Sainz, who he'll be replacing, gives him a chance to prove himself to get a ride for next year. We're already talking about next year, and we haven't even started this year, so it's just crazy how it all turns out. But yeah, it's a big shock move here in this sport, and definitely now we're looking forward to 2025 already to see how Lewis Hamilton will do in Ferrari colors.
I mean, and I think it also on the cusp of the whole Andretti thing that happened the day before. This news comes out to kind of cover our FOM and all this other thing, but the fact that fans, casuals, and even diehards are getting to a point that they weren't really all that keen on Formula One. I wasn't obviously looking forward to this year very much anyway. I was just going to work under the assumption that it was going to be the same crap that it has been for the last 2 years with Fish Lips and Red Fool. And instead, Lewis Hamilton not only retakes the headlines, he gets paid more than Fish Lips, which should be the case since he's better than him. But yeah, I mean, to think about it, it's like, to me, in a lot of ways, it's like Joe Montana going to the Kansas City Chiefs when they traded him away when he's still Joe Montana. Granted, he wasn't at 100% at that point in his career. He had suffered multiple injuries, and Bill Walsh had hedged for that for I don't know how many years prior to that. hence why he got Steve Young. But it finally became untenable, and they had to move Joe Montana. And it's interesting talking about Joe Montana and Steve Young since it's a Super Bowl. But like it's something like that. It would be like like Ray Lewis going to the Steelers. It would be like, I mean, I think for you, Josh, like with Jimmy Smith or with Keenan McCardell or somebody like that moving over to the Titans or something.
Don't
like
say that.
Sorry, there's no. I mean, it's either them or.
I mean, I think it's more of like Tom Brady, because Lewis and Tom Brady are like, each their one to one, I guess, in football and F1, right? Both the modern goats, and I mean, yeah, it'd be like if Tom Brady went over to the Bucks and still had a year left to play Patriots or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he it would have if Tom Brady had actually went to San Francisco like he wanted to, and Kyle Shanahan actually made that happen instead of being a bitch. They would have won a Super Bowl already, but that's beside the point. The reality of the world is that's kind of what it would be. You talked about LeBron. It would be like Jordan going to the Knicks, which would have been something. But of course, he hated the Knicks just like so many other people hate New York, which that's part of what drove him. I mean, he was just an angry guy, which I don't know why when you're as good as he was, but whatever. But yeah, Formula One, man. More people are thinking about 2025 than they are about 2024, and we only just started livery reveals for 2024. So I guess that tells you how good the 2024 season is going to be. But for Lewis Hamilton, he's got something to look forward to. I think in Carlos Sainz's case, you mentioned that, Josh. I think he does have options. There's one option that stands out more than the rest. There's been a couple of big signings. Of course, Leclerc gets re-signed by Ferrari. Norris gets re-signed by McLaren, so they have their driver lineup set for multiple years. That locks out two big seats with younger drivers, guys that are in the same, kind of wavelength as Carlos Sainz. But there's one manufacturer that's coming into Formula One in 2026 in Audi that needs a driver, a lead driver, to head their program. And just happens to be that his father has driven for Audi for the last few years in Rally Raid and just won the Dakar Rally. And why wouldn't they just go and sign Carlos Jr. to lead their charge in Formula One? He's been a development driver on and off for many years. He's driven for multiple teams. He understands a lot of the dynamics, and he has made himself into a Grand Prix winner, and theoretically the better driver at Ferrari over Leclerc. So I think that's where he's going. They're really. I was trying to think in my mind what else would really be there. He could go back to the Enstone team, Alpine, perhaps, if they decided to jettison Ocon or Gasly. Both of them, of course, are Grand Prix winners, but it might make sense. But that's really the only other idea that really makes sense and could actually come off, because there's no way in hell Fish Lips wants to drive with him, because Carlos Sainz wouldn't want to be a cuckold. Number one. Number two, him and Fish Lips didn't get along when they were teammates, supposedly, which doesn't surprise me, considering how great of a character Fish Lips is. Wonder where he got that from. And so, I mean, the reality is he's not going to Red Bull. Can't stay at Ferrari. Mercedes is the other one. I guess that's the one kind of wild card in that. Does Mercedes, because they have Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the young talent who's jumping from Formula 4 to Formula 2 this year, if he needs 2 years to develop in Formula 2, would they go and do a 1-year rental on Carlos Sainz prior to him going to Audi? I don't know if that really works when you consider if he were to go to Audi. I don't think that would be something that Mercedes and Daimler wants to deal with. So, I mean, there's other options there, but I honestly think he's going to Sauber or whatever the hell they're calling themselves these days for next year, and he'll spend a year having to eat it, so to speak, with their crappy car and everything before Audi fully comes in. But we'll find out about that as the season goes on. Now, a team that will not be on the grid, or at least as of now won't be on the grid, is Andretti Global Formula One. They had lodged, they paid all the trillions of dollars that it cost to lodge an entry. They basically jumped through hoops and went through, as they kept on moving the proverbial goalposts. Yet another football reference. During this whole process, Michael Andretti's team had and his people had answered all of those things. But in the end, the FOM, under dubious circumstances, decided that Andretti Global wasn't worthy of a spot on the grid, which is hilarious considering some of the teams that have been on the grid in recent years. The notion that Haas was like a year away from basically being owned by Russia, and had literally one of the worst drivers in the history of mankind driving one of those cars. And then you had Williams basically being the drizzling shits for I don't know how many years. And it's the only thing that really kept them around was legacy. Otherwise, I think they would have been out the door too. Sauber's been on and off, kind of been iffy for however many years since they lost like that full factory support from BMW back in the early aughts. They haven't been much of anything here, and they've had flashes here and there with Sergio Perez or whatever, but now they're a back end team until Audi comes along. So, I mean, you're talking about 30% of the grid right there, and you can question the validity of those three teams. And then, I mean, you talk about Alpine. They haven't been all that competitive over time in recent years. I mean, I'm trying to think also of the other. I mean, I talked about both Ferrari customers. I talked about one Mercedes customer. McLaren made that recovery last year, but let's be fair here. There have been lean periods for McLaren over the past, ever since Lewis left in 2012. After 2012, there have been lean periods with McLaren. You have whatever Red Bull Cash App, Visa, check cashing service, Gold, whatever, Gold's Gym, this, that, and the other thing, F1, which basically is minority, and they haven't really added much of anything to anything for their whole entire existence, other than a reason for One-Eyed Marco to talk which the fact he hasn't been, I mean, I'm not going to go there. I wanted to say something really effed up about One-Eyed Marco after the latest incendiary comments he had about Lewis Hamilton. But it's like he's just a bitter, angry, racist old man. And Red Bull harboring him tells you all you need to know about what they are as a company and as a brand in terms of motorsport. Harboring a guy like him for as long as they have. And it'll be interesting. We'll talk about that in the Motorsports Update with Karen Horner, considering what kind of guy he is, too. The absolute gem of the earth that he is, being a trust fund baby and then thinking he can go and flash his wiener to some woman and think it's okay, like he's freaking Anthony Weiner or something. I mean, it's unbelievable. The people, these people at Red Bull, the arrogance and how obnoxious they are. The world would be a better place without both of them. And Fish Lips, to be fair, but the fact is, we're stuck with him.
At least he wins, to his credit.
Sadly, but you know, in terms of the Andretti thing, it's absolutely an abomination that Andretti isn't on the grid. They're not. It basically says that for FOM and all these teams, they have no problem getting American sponsors. They have no problem racing 1/8 of their schedule in the United States of America and over 1/6 of their schedule in the Americas. They don't have with the sponsors. They race 5 races in the Americas, or 6, to be fair. Yeah. 6. Yeah. So essentially, a quarter of the schedule is in the Americas. You have an American driver. Granted, most Americans don't even know who the hell Logan Sargent is, for whatever reason, one way or the other. He drives for a team that's owned by an American business. You have other entities within Formula One that own teams that are American involved. You have the Liberty Media, excuse me here as I go and open my seltzer, they're American company. But an American brand with a name, with a dude that actually drove in Formula One. Granted, it wasn't great, but he drove in Formula One and did get a podium on his last race. His father is one of the greatest race car drivers of all time. He literally is a mogul in motorsports. He owns cars all over the freaking globe. If there's a series, there's more than likely an Andretti presence there. Yes, even in NASCAR, he does have a presence. It's just not fully written in there yet, with the whole Gainbridge thing. Because basically, if you see Gainbridge on it, it's a connection to Andretti now, because he's the co-owner guy and basically the benefactor who funded all that crap to get this through for them to not even get through. I mean, there's been really bad teams in Formula One. I've watched Formula One for a very, very long time, and I have seen some really god-awful teams. Now, if Andretti's team struggled, okay, fine, but would they be like 18 seconds off the pace like some of these teams have been over the time? Would they not be able to make the 107% rule? No. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me, Josh, that Andretti got denied. I mean, to be fair, I think everybody and their mother knew they were going to do it. They just had to come up with a reason or reasons for why. And per typical FIA, FOM, or FOM, they had no answers because they're full of shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's an old boys club. It's a country club with the FOM there. So, of course, yeah, I mean, I think it's always gonna be a tough hill for Andretti to climb to get to Formula One. But I do think overall it's still a insult to everyone's intelligence if you're a American F1 fan or someone that's in the motorsports industry, really not just a fan. But if you're just in the industry here in America, in NASCAR or IndyCar, I mean, even Haas. Let's say Haas for I think I don't they're not truly an American team, right? But now to have a brand new American team with Andretti and Cadillac, and then get denied entry at least for 2026 and 2027, it's insult to a lot of people's intelligence there. So I think they ought to be in this series. Obviously Andretti, a lot of history. Andretti in America, synonymous with the word speed for most of the 20th century, of course. And Andretti, Mario is a Formula One champion. He's won, the Indianapolis 500, the Daytona 500, won in the F1. Michael Andretti, although his F1 stint didn't go as well, he's still one of the most successful racers in American open wheel racing history, of course, and all that. So, and then of course you have one of the legacy brands that's established in IMSA right now with Cadillac, and they're not having a chance to put their badge on an F1 car. So that's pretty big with General Motors, of course. I don't know. Maybe if he had gone with Honda or somebody, maybe they would have accepted it. Maybe they just don't like GM. Maybe that's what it is. But it's interesting to see how all this plays out. And I think you talk about with all the American interests and stuff going in. You have Netflix, the Netflix series going in. You have Liberty Media, which is an American entity. You have all these brands: Visa, Cash App, Google, Oracle. All these different brands that are, have, ties to the United States. You have the United States Grand Prix, you have the Miami Grand Prix, you have the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and there's rumors of possibly a fourth one in Chicago or something like that, allegedly, that could happen. And then plus, like you said, you have the Mexican Grand Prix and the Canadian Grand Prix, of course, and you have all of those races potentially, or that are here, potentially being here in the United States, and you still don't want a true bred American team. Haas, of course, like I mentioned, is it was already on the grid, and then Gene Haas just bought them out, and half of it's based here in the United States, and the other half is based over in the UK. So they obviously, for whatever reason, they don't want a true American-based team, but it's sad to say that, and I think it should, the level of interest here in America, we'll see how long it lasts and everything. And I think that's one thing that would, I think, keep American interest, is if we actually had a legitimate American team, not just a backmarker like Haas, and one that can potentially feed in American drivers like Colton Herta, who is, should be an F1, honestly, with the level of talent that he has. Like Alex Palou, who a little bit old, but still, and he's not American, but he made his name here in the United States in IndyCar. Pato Award, another Americas-based driver, right? And all these other young talent that's currently in IndyCar that could shine their talent on the global stage if they had a team with a legitimate American team in F1. So it's a one-way street apparently with F1. So that's the other side of it, with, of course, the exciting news that we talked about earlier with Lewis going to Ferrari and everything. And then the other half is this kind of letdown, which I think maybe not so much of a letdown if we understand how it all works and everything, with Formula One kind of being the old man country club, like I said.
Yeah, it's kind of like Andretti, it's a good point you made about Honda, because he's had a relationship with Honda going back like 20 years, really. And Michael Andretti, once he left Newman Haas, he went to Team Green and eventually bought out Team Green, and that was a Honda program, and he drove his last few years of his career, last year and change of his IndyCar career was in a Honda powered car. He had tested in Formula One with Honda powered McLarens. He, with Wayne Taylor, runs the Acura program in IMSA. He runs Hondas and IndyCar. He worked with GM as well, and was planning on working with Cadillac. They were going to work with Alpine as a customer engine for a couple of years before Cadillac came in fully. But it's General Motors, the same General Motors that I think has won more races than anybody in NASCAR. The same General Motors that has the Corvette program that's won God knows how many races over the past 22 years or whatever, 23 years in IMSA and across the world. The same General Motors that's dominant in NHRA, et cetera, et cetera. It's effing General Motors. I'm no GM guy either, but for fuck's sake, it's GM and it's Cadillac. What you have Aston Martin, you have Ferrari, you have, Mercedes and some of these other, brands. Cadillac fits. Yes, they don't have a power unit ready to go, but let's be clear here. To make one of those stupid power units as it is, how expensive it is to make one, why the hell are they just going to have one willy-nilly? It's part of the reason why IMSA and World Endurance Championship, the way that they have their formula, is the most fruitful one right now in all of motorsports. It's because they came up with the right cost containment, and they came up with a balance of performance or convergence formula where you could have a turbocharged engine, or you could have a normally aspirated 5.5 liter V8 like Cadillac and like Corvette. You can go out there and race. And that's why the Rolex 24 a couple of weeks ago had 60 whatever cars, and there's going to be more next year. That's the whole. Formula One doesn't know what the hell they want. FOM doesn't know what they want. They have a real problem with branding. They're basically wanting to be their Formula E with engines is basically what they want to be. Because now, like, just as an example, another piece of news was the Spanish Grand Prix being moved from Catalonia from Circuit de Catalunya to the streets. It's like you already had a street race in Spain when Alonso was at his peak, and that track is now in complete disrepair, and that area looks like New York back in the 80s. It's like, what kind of stunt are you trying to do by going to Madrid? Like, I don't understand. You already had why? Because Formula E did Madrid, they think that they can run Formula One. Come on. Formula One cars need to be wide open. They need to be racing on permanent circuits, not on street circuits. Not driving in car parks either, which like they do in Miami. Like Monaco is Monaco. They shouldn't race there, but they do. That's iconic. It's been there forever. Okay. After that, this whole thing to going to street races with Vegas, it's a novelty act. I think after this season, with the same stupid schedule that they have, people are going to be put off by it, and that whole novelty act is going to start to be an issue. Miami is a joke. They have COTA. The U.S. Grand Prix usually is one of the best attended races of the whole calendar, and it's at a circuit that a lot of the drivers like. I wonder what the heck's going on there. It's a permanent circuit. It's in Austin, Texas. You have tons of fans that can come from everywhere. You can come from Mexico, even though they know they're going to have the Mexican Grand Prix the next week. You have, I mean, I don't know. It's fucking, I mean, Formula One's got an identity problem and they got a fan problem in that people don't want to watch fish lips, or there's plenty of people who don't want to watch fish lips win every fucking race by 30 seconds. And just basically have no competition in the process. So I mean they don't know what they want, and that's what it's going to be. So I guess that's what we have to deal with. We'll switch it around though. We'll go and bring it to NASCAR actually, where there's a general sense of trying to have competitiveness through whatever means, manipulation and the like. The clash at the Coliseum, third year they've ran it. The torrential rains in California moved the race from Sunday to Saturday. They got rid of the heat races. They got rid of, in the last chance qualifiers, you needed to go out in group qualifying and make it. If you didn't make it in the top 22, and you weren't Ryan Blaney, you were likely to go home, or you were going home. Ryan Blaney, just as an example, the defending Cup Series champion, needed to take the past champions provisional to make the show, and made use of it. Chase Briscoe ended up starting right on the tailback in 22nd, next to last, with Blaney, and moved up to the top 10. Barely made it in. Benefited from the last group really having a hard time getting pace in their qualifying session, which was really surprising, and it hung out the likes of Christopher Bell, Christopher Buescher, amongst others, who ended up getting hung out because of the qualifying setup there. I mean, it was interesting. It took, they ran about 18 laps, 20 something laps before they they were able to put up their big qualifying run. And then, but you talk about the people that didn't make the race. We'll get into who won and all this other stuff, but you have Josh Williams, who was literally the first car out, driving for Colleague. Hocevar, rookie driver. Josh Berry driving in his first race in the 4-car for Kevin Harvick. Daniel Suarez, who holds the LA race as a big one for him. Dylan, who finished third in this race last year. That Jones boy, first race back in a Toyota for him. Christopher Buescher, as I mentioned, who the Roush Fenway Keselowski team has had a nightmare at the Coliseum this whole entire time, but Brad was able to actually make it. So for the first time ever. Gumby Cindric, Daniel Hemrick in the 31. I mentioned Christopher Bell. Kaz Gralla driving for Rick Ware. His teammate actually did make it into the show. Harrison Burton and Zane Smith, another rookie, gets knocked out there in qualifying. But in terms of, on the other end of the qualifying spectrum was Dennis Hamlin, newly engaged to Jordan, his longtime partner, baby mama, all that. He's trying to, I guess, change the whole vibe and things with his career, knowing that basically all he needs is that championship. Because he's got a lot, basically everything else. He's won every big race, sans in the Brickyard 400, but he'll get a chance to do that later this year. He's won the Clash multiple times. I don't know if he really thought he was going to win or he was going to be in a position to win the Clash this year, but it worked out to where he got himself in position to do so. It was a Gibbs benefit. The new Toyota seemed to be very good, not just with the downforce, but I just with that team, with those cars, and with 2311, where they were able to they had better drive, and they had better braking, it seemed, than everybody else. So it was something they took advantage of, and Keebler Gibbs was the one who was the biggest benefactor for the majority of the day, ending up leading 84 laps in the race. You go and look at that. Yeah, I mean, the Gibbs guys, Denny Hamlin and Ty Gibbs, they led all but 9 laps of the 151 laps of the race. Joey Logano ended up leading 8 laps, but gosh, in the end, Denny Hamlin gets the win. He was spinning his tires basically off and going and smoking his tires in every corner, spinning the tires off, but nobody could catch him once he got the lead. Denny Hamlin starts his 2024 season with a bit of momentum, as he also goes to chase a 4th Daytona 500 victory, which would be pretty epic in his case, if he were to pull that one off here in a couple weeks' time.
Of course, with Denny Hamlin goes out, beats everybody's favorite driver once again there. So, definitely getting off on the right foot there, starting on the pole and coming off of shoulder surgery as well. That was documented this offseason that he did. And there was a little bit of doubt if he would even be available for this race, but ended up being available and was able to kind of tough it out here. Still kind of recovering from that surgery, but got back here, took the pole, and ended up winning the race. So, there was a lot of, dominance by Joe Gibbs. Ty Gibbs had a lot of that race led and, ran into traffic, and Joey Logano was able to kind of move him out of the way a little bit, although I think kind of overdrove the first corner on the last restart there, and allowed Denny Hamlin to kind of scoot into the lead there. So, then they had the tussle there after the race, a little bit of disagreements with Logano and Ty Gibbs. So you had that drama. Then, in the halftime, you had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. actually jumping out of the car and then going over to John Hunter Nemechek and unhooking the window net, which I don't think I've ever seen a driver go out and do that, especially when technically they're all supposed to still be in the car and everything. So, we've seen drivers go up to another car after the race when the window net's already kind of unhooked and down, and then go reach into the car, either to punch the guy or get in a little argument or whatever. But never seen kind of like what Ricky did there. But that was interesting, and you had that, and then a little bit of dust up with Larson and Bubba Wallace on the last restart. I think they got into it, and then Kyle kind of just used him up there at the end like that. So that. But I thought the short track racing, it was pretty decent. They didn't have any shifting. I don't know if they had shifting last year, but they didn't have any shifting in this race for sure. And it looked pretty solid. For the most part, it wasn't like amazing or anything like that, but I think it did what it was supposed to do in terms of having a race and having a preseason type of race like that to kind of get the action going and all that. You saw drivers overdrive into the corner, use the car in front of them as kind of a crutch or whatever to get in the corner, and everybody kind of overdriving unless you were in the lead there. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of typical of that style of racing, and also this track type with everything being so tight and narrow at this football Coliseum makeshift track. So you're going to see that type of racing, and I think now kind of curious to see what the short track racing will look like once we go to Martinsville, go to Bristol and all that. If it looks a little bit tighter, if it looks like kind of like this where you're really able to lean on guys throughout the race, and you're not, it's not a fair where you see the driver kind of just or the leader kind of just drive away from everybody. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, definitely this race was had a little bit of action throughout, and saw plenty of beating and banging and everything throughout the second half of this race. So Denny obviously coming out of here, he's the guy to start out the season. We'll see how his season goes, and if this is a preview for later in the year, kind of like what we saw with in 2022 with Logano winning this and then ending up being the season-ending champion for that. So that would be interesting. And actually interesting, I know I just thought of this, but Logano won the actual championship in 2022, and then last year Martin Truex won the regular season title after winning the season opening Clash. So it could be a good trend for Denny Hamlin. Even years so far, the winner of the Clash has gone on to win the regular title, so or the title at the end of the year in Phoenix. So that could be interesting. But yeah, Denny wins the race. Of course, Kyle Busch winning or getting second podium for definitely for the people there with Morgan and Morgan on there. If you're a Florida native, and I know they're national now, but seeing that Morgan and Morgan for the people, that's one that's ingrained into my mind after years of seeing those commercials. So that was an interesting paint scheme that they had there, of course. And Ryan Blaney coming all the way from the back, finishing third. So Team Penske getting off to a decent start here with Logano in fourth as well. So yeah, I mean, it was a interesting race and everything. Was able to actually watch it, of course, but glad they were able to have it, of course, because obviously if they had waited until Sunday, which NASCAR has done before, they wouldn't probably have had it. But they were proactive enough to try to get it to Saturday night, which they were able to. Might have screwed over some people that were trying to fly in to see the race, but it turned out at first it didn't look like there was going to be a whole lot of people, but I think as the day kind of went on, more people found out about it. You saw, like, at least through social media and stuff, at least on the front stretch, there's definitely a decent amount of people that kind of turned out into the grandstands. So obviously they took a loss, it's making the best out of the bad situation and everything. So at least give credit to NASCAR on being able to hold the race. And we'll see if they have this race next year. Of course, with we don't know where the Clash is going to be, or if they'll even have a Clash, but don't know if it'll be here in Southern California again, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's something they were talking about it on the socials. Justin Marks going and jumping on an idea that Landon Huffman mentioned on his Twitter, where it would be to the benefit of not only NASCAR but short tracks here in the U.S. if they would invest in these short tracks, run the race there, say at a New Smyrna or whatever, one of these tracks may be more local to the teams, and invest in those tracks, run the race, people get to know those tracks, similar to what SRX was trying to do in a way, but they didn't. It wasn't like investing in the infrastructure. They were just racing there. But the idea was to go and invest in the infrastructure, putting safer barriers in and getting fans in, temporary grandstands, being able to go and see some of these great racetracks that we have in this country that they're not using since they decide they have to race in a football state. An archaic football stadium. But I think also the notion of racing in Mexico is also there, and there are options with that. If they race the Clash in the summer, I think Canada would also be there would be options in Canada because they have ovals in Canada based on the CASCAR series. They use, but I mean, Hermanos Rodriguez, make an oval. They have an oval version for the NASCAR Mexico series too. So all different things there. We'll see what happens with that because these quote all-star races or these whatever you want to say, the exhibitions have kind of taken a hit in recent years. The quality has gone down greatly. So it would be nice to see something different or something that was interesting, to be fair. Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Blaney, Logano, Larson, the top five. Bowman, Briscoe, Keselowski in his first LA Clash. Martin Truex, the defending race winner, and William Byron round out the top 10. Essentially, which it's no surprise, it was a Gibbs and Hendrick benefit. You look at the results there. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the top 10 were those two teams represented. Preece, Bubba was the last car in the lead lap. Darrell Walsh Jr. got spun on the last restart and then went up the tunnel and said no mas. He said screw it. John Hunter Nemechek from 21st position to 13th. Tyler Reddick driving a Jordan brand number 45, finished 14th. Ross Chastain, who hit everything but the lottery, kind of fulfilling the prophecy of being the new Ernie Irvan every single race. He finished 15th. Oh, Richard, getting into it with Michael McDowell, which I get because Michael McDowell is a pansy. People always go for his whole Jesus freak routine, but then he drives like an asshole half the time. So, Richard was like, I'm not going to have that. And but then also he had an issue with John Hunter Nemechek, and of course he's a Nemechek, so he's going to drive over his head and be a dumbass. Corey LaJoy, Keebler Gibbs, who was the leader and then ended up getting moved. McDowell, Gagson, Justin Haley, who blew up. He started in the top 10. He's had good luck at the Coliseum in the past, qualified on pole for the Clash through the heat races a couple of years ago. William Clyde Elliott II and Todd Gilliland rounding out the field. I mentioned the drivers that ended up DNQing for the race itself. So we'll see what happens as we get to the Daytona 500. We'll, next week? Definitely preview all the big three NASCAR series, or at least we'll preview the Daytona 500. I know that. Might have some guests on because it is the start of the NASCAR season in full force. We'll find out. We'll see how the week goes. See how the Super Bowl goes. That'll also play a role in that, I think. And the like. So, speaking of the Super Bowl 58, weather affecting the 49ers in terms of their practice situation. They're outdoors at UNLV. The Kansas City Chiefs were able to get the Raiders facility So they're practicing indoors. The Niners, it looks like, aren't going to be able to share the facility with the Kansas City Chiefs. Whatever. In the grand scheme of things, it's just yet another thing to go and get the Niners ready to try and stop what has been 29 years since their last Super Bowl win. Kermit the Frog trying to get his third Super Bowl in 4 years or 5 years or whatever the fuck. So that he's trying to do his whole Brady routine. You got that famous singer, her boyfriend going out there, trying to go and break more records and be a tool in the process. But I think one thing that we have to look at, Josh, for this game, at least on both sides of the ball, is the running game. I mean, everyone I've been saying this for weeks, and I'll keep on going with it, even though in a couple days from now they're going to give the award to Lamar Jackson, that Christian McCaffrey is the MVP of the league, because the offense starts with him here at the San Francisco 49ers. Ever since he's become a San Francisco 49er, he's taken his game to another level, if it was possible. And Kyle Shanahan's offense has looked completely different with him as their running back. He's made Brock Purdy's life, given him a lot of comfort, a lot of opportunity to kind of be able to get out of jail card that he is. Christian McCaffrey is at a level of an MVP, and he may not win he won't win the MVP of the league, but he could win Super Bowl MVP on Sunday, and I think that matters. That does matter pretty much, as it matters a lot too. So Isaiah Pacheco on the other side has been a revelation since he got drafted by Kansas City, the Rutgers product, New Jersey guy. Runs hard, runs tough. He's a guy who goes and sets a tone. And the way the Niners have been defending the run recently, I honestly believe that Isaiah Pacheco is going to have a good game. And if that's the case, that also means Kermit the Frog is going to be able to do what he wants, dictating the ball, where he's going with it. He'll be able to use Rashee Rice, who is basically his only wide receiver, but he can also kind of do Deebo Samuel stuff. So it's interesting how there's a lot of similarities with these teams. Of course, the 49ers have George Kittle, the best actual tight end in the NFL. Not a poser who's a wide receiver, but he's massive. But, in terms, you got a lot of similarities with these two teams, and it's interesting. This matchup compared to a couple of years ago, was 4 years ago when they played. They had Tyreek Hill, Kansas City. They were more of a dynamic downfield passing team. Now they're more of a medium, short to medium passing game. But of course, Patrick Mahomes can do whatever the hell he wants. He's the face of the league. I think the NFL honestly wants him to win. The way that they put enough, the amount of commercials that bastard has between him and Kelsey, the whole work and talking about fixes and stuff. The narrative, even with how bad the Kansas City Chiefs played this regular season, they get to the playoffs and all of a sudden their offense looks better than it has all year. Their defense has been the better side of the ball. And, they have guys like Clark and whoever. They have L'Jarius Sneed, which there's an irony in that Mooney Ward used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he wasn't as good of a player as he has become since he became a San Francisco 49er. The guy that essentially took his spot, L'Jarius Sneed, has become one of the best corners in the league. So now you have that, the parallel as well. I mean, so there's a lot of similarities with these two teams. It's a game that I think it was a close game 4 years ago. The Niners were up and they could have finished the deal, but Kyle Shanahan got too conservative. They weren't able to make a couple of stops, and Bob Sala's defense and whatever. And 3rd and 18 happened, and Kermit the Frog brought him back, and they won the game and became a Super Bowl MVP, even though he didn't really play a great game. But in this case, I mean, this game should be a close matchup. I mean, last year in the game against Philly, that game was close basically the whole way. Philly played, I think, Jalen Hurts played better than Patrick Mahomes for a good amount of the game, but he made the one mistake that he couldn't make, and that was essentially the difference. The fumble that he had that was returned for a touchdown. It's going to be the small margins here in this game to decide it all. And to be fair, that's what you want in a Super Bowl. You want it to be about the little things and details. And when you're talking about a Hall of Fame coach in Andy Reid, you're talking about a guy in Kyle Shanahan who's done basically everything but win this game. Knowing that his dad was a 2-time Super Bowl winning head coach, and he also was the offensive coordinator when the 49ers won the Super Bowl the last time, and Steve Young set the record for the most touchdowns ever in a Super Bowl game. You got Ed McCaffrey was a part of the 49ers when they won that Super Bowl, and he then went on to go and win 2 Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos. He's won 4 total. He also won 1 with the Giants. But he won 4 Super Bowls, with 2 with Mike Shanahan as his head coach at Denver. And now Christian McCaffrey goes and plays with Kyle Shanahan, or for Kyle Shanahan. There's that situation there, and how close they are. Olivia Culpo, Christian McCaffrey's fiance, decided to pay, I don't know how much money it was, to buy one of the suites in Allegiant Stadium for her future mother-in-law, in Lisa McCaffrey and the family. Pretty insane. I mean, there's a lot going on here in this game, but I mean, the running game to me, Josh, is going to be huge on both sides of the ball, and then just both defenses, how they show up, how they play. Kansas City's defense has been outstanding the whole year. Steve Spagnuolo, one of the best jobs he's done in his career as one of the better defensive coaches and coordinators in recent memory. They have a lot of talent on that side of the ball, but so does the 49ers. And the 49ers honestly have not put a complete game together in these playoffs so far. So I honestly wonder if they do put a full game together, what that actually could mean. And there are a lot of guys that I think are due to have a good performance, and it's the best time to have a good performance for sure.
Yeah, you say that, and the ability of the 49ers to put together a complete game. I think that's going to be the key factor. Is I think if they do, then they should be able to win. But on the other hand, you have the defense of the Kansas City Chiefs with how they've been able to perform throughout the year at a fairly elite level. With Chris Jones lining up at defensive tackle and defensive end at times, and then you have L'Jarius Sneed at corner, Nick Bolton at linebacker, of course. So you have a lot of good players on the Kansas City defense. Karlaftis, another linebacker that's been pretty good as well. So they've been able to put up pretty good numbers and be effective throughout the season. And then you have for the offense of the 49ers, they have a lot of talent. So I think that's going to be really the key matchup in this game. Of course, we know that Mahomes and then they'll be able to score and do all these sorts of things. And I think, of course, for them, it's going to be able to run the ball as well. So I think this game is going to really take on a defensive and offensive running the ball type game. It's going to look, I think, very old school. It's not certainly going to be like, or it could be like last year, but it won't look like in the same where passing was really the highlight. I think this is going to be a very physical matchup. You're going to see two teams go out there and try to win at the line of scrimmage, and you're going to see Patrick Mahomes, running around and stuff. You're going to see Purdy having to hang in there till the last minute to find the open guy, and everything, and you're going to see a lot of that stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how Brock Purdy can go up against the Steve Spagnuolo defense and go up there and try to move the ball down the field. So it should be interesting. But you have that, of course, and then the field. You talk about the advantage that possibly could be an advantage to use the Raiders practice facility over UNLV, but maybe it makes the 49ers tougher and more resilient for them to be able to go out and play in this game. So that's going to be interesting. And I think what type of offense does Andy Reid put out there? Of course, it's going to be a lot of run the ball, but how are they going to pass? And I think with Patrick Mahomes this playoffs, he's been very short ball, intermediate ball type player, which that's kind of what Tom Brady did and everything. I think the era of the Legion of Zoom where Mahomes could just like flip it down the field, it's not necessarily over, but at the same time, I think it's gonna be a different type of game. So it should be interesting to see, and I think both teams match up pretty well against each other. So I think we're gonna see a pretty good game out there. But the 49ers, they have a chance to redemption from 4 years ago, and have a chance to go out there and win the Super Bowl for first time since 1994 against the Chargers. And the Chiefs have the ability to put Patrick Mahomes, and he's already up there in the GOAT conversation, but of course he's going to have his third Super Bowl ring in 5 seasons. So it's very much like Tom Brady. So definitely could have that there. So it's definitely going to be a very fun game to watch, I think.
It's going to be a close contest. And also thinking about it just while you were talking, Josh, about the game, that the special teams is another piece. Punting wise, I think both teams are very good at that, of course. Kicking wise, brother Knight Harrison Butker has been inconsistent compared to previous seasons. But I would say that he's definitely a more proven commodity compared to the Jake Moody, the rookie for the 49ers, who has a big leg, but in recent weeks later in the season seemed to have some struggles. Game-winning kicks he has missed. So if it does come down to kicking, how will that work out? Now, of course, being indoors, it's controlled, being in Allegiant Stadium. So taking one of those variables out of there, as long as the field itself is good, that also would be a take away another variable that could get in the way. But I mean, you talk about some of those defensive guys on the Chiefs. I said Clark. I meant Chris Jones. I guess I was thinking about 4 years ago, Frank Clark. But, you know, guys that could go out there and really make a difference. Like in the NFC Championship game, it was Jawan Jennings. You know, he had to make big plays. You had guys on defense that have been quiet. You know, Chase Young had been quiet for a while, had to make some plays. You had guys on the defensive, like in the secondary, to really come up big. You know, that it's something where this is the biggest game there is. You know, you go out there and you make plays. I remember when the Rams in Tennessee, and it was that guy Mike Jones or something, who the linebacker who made the play and tackled, I think Kevin Dyson short of the end zone, and
I don't know.
no, I think it was Kevin or Wycheck, one of them others. I know Wycheck threw the forward pass that ended up being the Music City Miracle, but I forget that play offhand. I know McNair threw a ball. I feel like it was Dyson, and then Jones went and tackled him at like the 1 to save the touchdown from happening, and then St. Louis winning the Super Bowl with Kurt Warner taking after he had taken over, and Dick Vermeil winning that Super Bowl and all that. But you know, like it's people like that. You know, Larry Brown, who nobody really thought about when Dallas won that Super Bowl. He had a couple of picks of Neil O'Donnell. You have guys that unsung heroes, people who may not have been big time players, become big time players in this spot. It's a place where, for Kyle Shanahan, honestly, this is his career right here. If he can go out there and put a game plan together, and this team can play to their best level, which they have played at times a good amount of this season, I have a hard time believing that the Kansas City Chiefs can beat the 49ers. It's not just because they're my favorite team. They've been the better team across the majority of the season. Now, in the playoffs, we can make the case that Kansas City has been better, and it's pretty easy to say that based on what they've done. Kermit in Buffalo, the way he was just dealing there. The first round matchup, basically being able to destroy Miami from the jump. And then in the AFC Championship game, Patrick Mahomes barely could miss. And they took the game out of Lamar Jackson's hands, and took away their offense. And because of that, they weren't able to, and it wasn't like it was a high scoring game either, but because it wasn't a high scoring game, largely because of their defense. So, too. So we'll see what happens with that. I mean, I'm trying to think of guys off the top of my head that'd be X factors, but you know, Debo is a X factor as long as he's on the field. I think Rashee Rice on the other end is the same thing. You look at, I think the interior, the defensive tackles. I think, you know, you have the Niners went and signed, why the hell am I forgetting his name? The guy from Philadelphia. off the Philadelphia defensive line last year, and see, I thought
Derek
Hargrave.
Barnett.
Yeah, Hargrave. Yeah, Javon Hargrave. And then you have Armstead, who might possibly win the Walter Payton Man of the Year, because he's been the Niners have put him up for that, I think, the last 4 or 5 years. He's his presence, especially against the run, that's going to be key. The same thing on the Kansas City side, trying to go and control Christian McCaffrey. Is it possible? It has been at times this year, but will they be able to manage that? The guy who theoretically is the MVP of the league, and the straw that stirs the drink, pardon the pun, for the 49er offense. And then for all the disrespect that Brock Purdy takes, not just from hacks in sports, TV, and radio, but from other players, former players, and the like. This is what he wants. This is his spot. He led that comeback. They were able to come back against Green Bay. He led a 20-plus point comeback, or 17-point comeback against the Detroit Lions. What if he just decides to go and put his foot on the gas from the beginning and try to take control of it from the start, and don't give the opportunity to Patrick Mahomes? What would happen in that spot? Even like I can think about some of these games this year. I mean, the Philadelphia game, they had a bad first quarter, and then proceeded to absolutely anally annihilate the Eagles. They destroyed the Cowgirls, and that game was basically over before it started. A good amount of the games, especially against tough competition, they went about it the other way, and they just were comprehensive. The one exception, of course, was against Baltimore. And that's a concern. If he goes and plays like that, Kansas City is going to make them pay. It took Baltimore until the second half for them to make the Niners pay. It won't take Kansas City as long. So Brock being, they can say game manager, it's fine. If that means he's not turning the ball over, he can be a game manager. I could give two shits if Brock Purdy is a fucking game manager. He can game manage his way and have a piece of hardware on his freaking hand. That's fine. Call me a game manager too, if that means I'm going to go and have a big effing ring at the end of 60 minutes. But, I think he is ready for this moment and ready for this spot. Heard all the bullshit. They're going to keep on saying it. Everyone's talking about Mahomes because of his legacy, the whole Brady comparison, 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, Josh mentioned. But what about Brock Purdy? What about Mr. Relevant? What about 262? Tom Brady was 199, and 6 other quarterbacks were picked before him. I don't know how many quarterbacks were picked before Brock Purdy, but he was the last pick in the draft. And started third he was the third string quarterback on the depth chart. He was a third string quarterback. It worked out that way. He was going to be the backup. Then he became the third string quarterback and ended up having to be the quarterback, and has been a revelation ever since he's been the 49er quarterback. This is where he goes and joins Joe Montana. It's where he joins Steve Young. If he can go out there and have a great game, a great performance on Sunday. and he's capable of it. That's the difference. It wasn't the same feeling with Jimmy Garoppolo. This one is different for sure. I mean, for me, I've been conflicted, of course, because if you pick against Patrick Mahomes at your peril. I just have to pick my team. I can't tell myself to pick Patrick Mahomes just because it's Patrick Mahomes. I can't do it. I say the 49ers get the dub. They win 27 to 23 is my score. Josh, what do you say in terms of the game and who will win in this score?
Yeah, I have to go with the 49ers here. It's just hard. I mean, I think we both picked the 49ers here, but I think they are also, just legitimately the better team. I think they have a better all-around team around them. So I think they'll get it done. But I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with 24 to 21. A little bit lower, but still a fairly close game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna come down to late in the game there, anyways, and that both those scores lead into that for sure. And I guess we can go and we can also make MVP choices. I'm gonna say CMC ends up being the Super Bowl MVP with if they win as long as they win the game there. So Phil, so CMC MVP of the game. How about you, Josh?
I'll just say Brock Purdy gets MVP.
Which would be, which is what has been the trend, of course, just like the MVP of the league in the regular season has become a quarterback award somehow or another. The winning quarterback has been the MVP of the Super Bowl for I don't know how many years in a row. So I think the last time that it wasn't was
Adrian Peterson, probably, right?
Adrian Peter. You mean Von? I know Von Miller. Von Miller won the MVP for Denver.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about the. I thought you were talking about the regular MVP.
Oh yeah, Adrian Peterson was the last non-quarterback to win the MVP of the league, and that was like almost a decade ago. Basically a decade ago or more. And then in terms of the Super Bowl, I think it was Von Miller was the last non-quarterback to win Super Bowl MVP. But, I guess we Super Bowl MVP list. Got a Football Reference.
Julian Edelman.
No, actually,
Cooper Kupp.
Cooper Kupp and Julian Edelman. But yeah, Von Miller. All right, so I wasn't. So there's been quarterbacks. The last non-offensive player was Von Miller. So there you go. You had that. Cooper Kupp won it for the Rams. Julian Edelman. That is whatever. That was a year after. Oh God. It's nauseating. And then I guess awards index in terms of NFL. What is it? AP, the most valuable player. Yeah, that's So the last it was Adrian Peterson in 2012. Yep, and that is and before that. It had been since LaDainian Tomlinson So ever since 2007, only once since 2006 has a non-quarterback won the MVP of the league, which is ridiculous to think. Especially when you look at back in the 90s. I mean, it was, to be fair, I mean, Steve Young won it twice. Brett Favre won it 3 years in a row. But then you had 3 out of 4 years where you had Barry Sanders, Terrell Davis, and Marshall Faulk. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. NFL honors. We'll also see what happens with the game itself. And depending on how that game goes, you'll probably hear it in my voice, if I have a voice or not, depending on what happens there. So we'll see what happens on episode 207 of the GSP. So livery reveals, we'll get in the roundup here. The whatever the hell they want to call themselves, the Alfa, what do they call it? What used to be the Alfa Romeo team, Sauber.
Kick Sauber.
Kick, Steak, Sauber, whatever. They're basically Team Green now, with carbon fiber and green on their car. For years, of course, they've said green is unlucky on cars, but I guess they don't care. Williams with the FW46, and new sponsor Komatsu, slightly tweaked scheme from last year, added a couple of sponsors to that, mostly a couple of shades of blue there, and then the orange accents of Gulf, and then the Duracell copper top on the cowl, and over there on the engine, the air intake there. So that's the Williams. They've also those two have debuted their liveries. You also have I think Haas also showed their livery a few days ago. They've added more. The Haas is actually much bigger on the side pod, much more of a, I guess, more black, I guess. I don't know. More of the carbon fiber look. As a case, the MoneyGram, you'd think, because that's the team sponsor. Oh, they have Chipotle. I didn't know that. Oh. So that'll be mostly black on the sides, and then it's more like maybe like 85-90% black car, and then you have the Haas and MoneyGram as the red accents, and then little parts of white there, which both fit the Haas and MoneyGram logos as well. Trying to see what else is there. Yeah, I mean, you have some of these launches with the motorcycles, or MotoGP, Trackhouse with the basically American flag wrapped around their bikes, and even though they have 2 Spanish riders. Let's see here. The in the news of the sprint race format, for whatever reason, they insist on continuing those. So the sprint race format now, they'll have the qualifying, free practice and sprint qualifying will take place on Friday, sprint race on Saturday, shortened race format will proceed qualifying for the Grand Prix, which will occupy its usual Saturday along with the full race on Sunday. There will also park permit can be reopened between sprint race and Grand Prix qualifying. Necessary setup tweaks. They'll also roll back on the restricted power unit allocation. They'll have 4 power units. So that's the ICE, the internal combustion engine, MGUK, MGUH, and turbocharger, which, considering there's 24 Grand Prix, they should have been doing this anyway. DRS also will be enabled 1 lap after a caution or 1 lap after the start of the race. So those are new changes added on top of the sprint race format to Formula One. And the last piece there in terms of F1 is the whole Karen Horner thing. I hadn't heard about it, but then I started seeing it through the Grid Talk and other things where there's a probe going on within the team. He's denied, but he's not exactly known for telling the truth. So he's the launch investigation. I mean, it sounds like he's sent lewd photographs to a female, I think, employee or somebody, which it's not. It seems to be a sad trend in a lot of circles and inappropriate. The guy's been the team principal at this team since they started in Formula One in 2005. He comes from money. His dad was I forget, not Carlin. What the heck was the team that he ran? They were in the lower formulas. His dad owned the team, and then he was running it. I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but he's been around a while. He's somebody that, of course, got an ego, to say the least. He's a sore loser, and he's an even worse winner. And in this case, I think he believes he can fade doing what he did through whatever lies or using the media to his advantage. But I know innocent until proven guilty. Okay, fine, but maybe it's the karma train finally catching up to him for all the bullshit that he's pulled, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. I think that when you're a married man and you have to go and you're married to a freaking Spice Girl, and you're telling me you have to get your jollies off by going and sending lewd photos. I mean, that's pretty weak. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't put it past other people that are team principals. I look at these guys, and there's at least a couple of them that I would figure probably have done it too, but they haven't gotten caught yet. But with Horner being the most high profile of them all right now, this is a big problem for him. It's a big problem for Red Bull. I mentioned One-Eyed Marco and the way he is. They've let him basically run roughshod and say incendiary things for decades. Now you have the team principal doing what he's doing, allegedly. I don't know, Josh. To me, it seems like inmates running the asylum, but then when it comes to Red Bull, they're not really a actual team. They're just they're a drink manufacturer. But now that Matisich isn't here anymore, of course, they gotta do something if these things are really true. And in terms of Marco, he says fucked up shit all the time. But in terms of Christian Horner, doesn't matter how rich you are or if you're a trust fund baby, you go and pull a stunt like that, and it's legitimate. We'll see you later, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting situation that you'll have to see what the outcome is, and they have to think that something will come out of it, and be really shocking if especially in this day and age, if nothing came out of it. But it's also Red Bull, and there's possibility that could happen. But I think the ramifications of that, who would they put in for their replacement if they asked them to step down from that? Also, what does it do to the team? Do engineers start leaving and going to other organizations? Do they decide to follow Lewis over to Ferrari, or start there? It could start a ramifications that could affect the team down the line, and affect the team's performance. And of course, if he stays on, and this gets bigger and bigger, it becomes a distraction. Of course, we'll see how the investigation comes through, and if they come to a conclusion, or if it's ongoing in between the season and everything. So that's something to look at too, is if how long this will take to resolve the matter. So legally and internally. So if they ask him to step down before the season starts, that's pretty big. But once the season starts going, how long does it keep going? And till it's obviously it looks like the team's performance could be affected by it. But obviously that's something that could happen. But it's not a good situation. And like I said, he's married to Spice Girl and everything. And it's a power dynamic. They that's really what it is. But we'll just have to see what comes out of that. And obviously it's not a good situation.
Definitely not. And I mean, we're talking about F1 and the good of Lewis's announcement, and how common, just regular people are hearing about it, and it's a big deal. And then you hear this, and then you have to wonder what Formula One and FOM, FIA, all of them are thinking here or trying to do when it comes to like sexual whatever it is, assault or sexual deviancy. In the case of Karen Horner, allegedly. The last thing, before we get to your sim segment, Josh, is with Indy cars, of course. Indy cars is one of your specialties. Kyle Larson, someone who's going to be in an Indy car at the Indianapolis 500 this year, weather permitting, is going to have a test at Phoenix International Raceway with his group at McLaren. Tony Kanaan, the performance coach, will be there. They hired an engineer that's been at multiple organizations to be his Larson's engineer for this one-off deal. We'll see what it is, and I mean, I guess for Kyle Larson, knowing that he was going to be able to possibly get in an Indy car, he probably was thinking about that instead of being in the Cup car, but he still ran in the top 5. Also has got his hands full with the High Limit Series this year, which is essentially the All-Star Circuit of Champions combined with his and Brad Sweet's sprint car deal. They're running a full championship in 2024. So that he's got a lot of irons in the fire, Kyle Larson, but he's might test. If he doesn't end up being able to test at Phoenix, the next time he's going to be able to get in a car, actual car, will be the open test at Indianapolis. So I'm assuming he really wants to get in that car and get those laps at a racetrack where, of course, he's won a Cup Series championship at a few years ago.
I mean, I think for Larson, this is a pretty big deal, and obviously he needs seat time. Obviously, he's going to be competing in the Indianapolis 500 and at least attempting to make the field this year. So it's important to get as much seat time. And it is kind of interesting to see that he's only, he was in the open test back in October, and he's going to be doing this private test here at Phoenix, which it looks like he's already done some of it because on Twitter he posted a picture of his IndyCar on pit road and said, "I wish I had this aero kit back in November," referencing his battle with Ryan Blaney for the Cup Championship there. So he got that, and maybe possibly testing more tomorrow, or if it's just going to end up being a night test, similar to how NASCAR, with the Clash ended up happening. Maybe it's something like that. But for Larson, of course, you have this opportunity here, and then won't have another opportunity to get behind the wheel of an IndyCar in real life until mid-April. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch and see how he does in this. I think he's kind of banking on the simulator kind of helping him out and filling in the gaps and stuff like that. But also he's going to have to be doing a lot of neck training. I think, I assume he is, but I haven't really. Maybe he hasn't really put on neck muscle. Maybe he's one of those guys that strengthened his neck, but it doesn't get any thicker or anything like that. But because obviously you see these IndyCar guys, they've got thicker necks than some of the F1 guys because they actually experience a little bit more force than they do. But that's something to be interesting, and kind of notice that with Jimmy Johnson, although Jimmy did a lot more than Kyle Larson is doing here. So that's going to be interesting to look at too. But for Larson, of course, 217 miles an hour back in October for the test there in the IndyCar. We'll see what their speeds, if they report it here at Phoenix, and then we'll see how he does in April. But it's a big step in him to be able to gain more confidence and run the IndyCar, and we'll see if he's able to put up competitive lap times that'll safely put him in the field. And obviously he's there to win, so we'll see if he's able to be competitive enough to lead laps and everything. But he will also be able to do this in 2025 as well, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and considering what the McLarens were able to do in last year's 500, Felix Rosenqvist was super fast. Pato O'Ward was really fast, and of course Alexander Rossi, a former winner of this race, being able to go out there and have an opportunity. It's a good situation to jump into. And then Tony Kanaan in his final Indy 500 had a solid day in in his car. So I mean, the McLaren team, unlike when they had Alonso years ago, they're in a much different spot, and the likelihood of being able to make the show is high. He trying to get it into the top, the top 30, which is locked in. That's really an initial goal, but if he can make the Fast 9 or whatever, I mean, the thing is, I probably wouldn't be able to even compete in the Fast 9 or Fast 12 or whatever, because he'd probably have a cup race the next day, unless I don't know what the schedule, where the schedule lies in terms of the NASCAR Cup schedule relative to Indianapolis 500 qualifying. So that's all, based on whether the weather, of course, cooperates too. But
I think that's during All-Star weekend.
Okay, so that would be, so he could theoretically run if they move the qualifying earlier in the day, which I think they ran it earlier in the day last year. He could theoretically run if he made the Fast 12, then get on a plane and a helicopter and do that whole jazz, and then get a car to get to Wilkesboro or wherever. I think it's Wilkesboro again, right? So going in the middle of nowhere, Carolina. So that'll be his plan, I guess, if that all comes off. And speaking of qualifying, speaking of making the show at the Indianapolis 500, right now, the rumors and the way things are rolling, it looks like there's going to be 35 or 36 cars for this year's Indianapolis 500, at least attempting to make the field. And after the dramatic qualifying of last year, which saw Green Rehal initially go home, but because of the accident that with, what is it? It was Catherine Legg and then Stephen Wilson. Stephen Wilson ended up being knocked out of the race. So Graham Rahal ended up taking over for him. But in terms of getting into the field, and you think about it for the Daytona 500, which we'll be talking about next week, it used to be in the dual races, the twin 125s, then it became the dual 150s, that the top 15 in that race would make the show. No matter where you were qualifying wise, whatever, if you finished or in the top 14, not counting the front row person in that race, you'd made the show. Then after that, essentially the top 30 was locked in after both races. From 31 through whatever was based on qualifying, speed, and then there was provisionals back in the day. For many years, that's how it had been. But recently, because NASCAR implemented the charter system, 36 cars are locked into the field no matter what before we even start the Daytona 5, before we even get to qualifying for the Daytona 500. So there's only 4 spots open for open cars. Essentially, the fastest open car or the 2 fastest open cars that show up will end up being in the field no matter what. And then 1 car, the top finishing open car in each duel, ends up being in the race as well. That's how the race has gone. Now, what this has to do with IndyCar, and especially the Indianapolis 500, imagine if you have 27 cars locked into the show at Indianapolis before we even get to qualifying, and essentially we're having the shootout is essentially for the last 3 rows, because everybody who's a full-time participant is locked in. It's not. I mean, definitely with the Indianapolis 500, it definitely doesn't fly. For me as a purist, but then I also was around when the IRL came along and they did 25 and 8. They also had 35 cars in the Indy 500 in 1997. So I mean, the notion that we're trying to do stay with what has been the norm for many decades. It looks like IndyCar is going down the route of charters, Josh. And I know on social media, and Chad Frankenfield is one person who's very outspoken about it. I'm not as it's not like a raging thing. It's just sad because that's one of the things that makes Indy 500 qualifying so dramatic. The whole Graham Rahal thing would have never happened last year if they had locked in spots. You could be absolute dog shit, which the Rahal team was, and you're still going to make the show. And then you might be sending a car like R.C. Enerson with his team, the team that he was with, home, perhaps, even though he was faster than X amount of cars. There's it would turn into the same kind of thing like when it's kind of like what happened with like the days of Penske going and missing the show after winning the last two Indy 500s and winning the last two poles at the Indianapolis 500 in 1995 with Emerson Fittipaldi and Al Unser Jr. That wouldn't happen. Bobby Rahal after winning the IndyCar championship, going and failing to qualify in 1993. I mean, there's the drama and dramatic the last day getting into a car and backing it into the show. Literally, there was the drama in 2010 or something with Brian Herta owning a team and with Sebastian Saavedra, and he puts it in the fence. But because of what Sarah Fisher's team does and with Jay Howard and then Paul Tracy, somehow or another, Sebastian Saavedra, who's in Methodist Hospital getting evaluated, backs himself back into the Indianapolis 500. Those kind of things aren't going to happen if they have a locked-in field. Now, do I get why they want a locked-in field? Sure. But, Josh, I know you had some takes on that. It's really... you're losing what makes IndyCar racing, one of the things that makes IndyCar racing unique compared to other forms of racing at this point.
Well, I mean, the Indianapolis 500 is supposed to be comprised of the fastest 33 cars, and that's why it's called the fastest 33. When bump day happens, that's why there's the drama. Even if it's 3 to 4 cars that probably have no shot at actually winning the race, it's the 3 to 4 cars that are trying to make the field for the Indianapolis 500. And granted, there's a lot more excitement when there is a lot more entries attempting to make the field. If we had 40 cars making the field or attempting to make the field, this would be a lot more intense. There's definitely a lot of activity that goes on that we've seen in the past. Of course, last year we saw it with Graham Rahal not making the race, and then he ended up being inserted into the field, taking over a car, but the team didn't earn any winnings from that. So I think that's part of it and everything. But I think for them to consider this, I mean, I think you have to also consider the business model of how they're running these organizations and everything. If it comes down to them like why do they need to depend so much on the Indianapolis 500? Obviously, it's the biggest race of the year, but this race shouldn't be the make or break in terms of sponsorships and money and all that stuff. I think that's why they're trying to lock themselves in and do this guarantee, and so that they can ensure the long-term viability for the teams. And just disagree with making the Indianapolis 500 a guaranteed field. That's never been supposed to be like that. That's why the 25-8 rule was so controversial, back in the day and everything. So, of course, I've experienced it as well, failing to qualify for the Open Wheels 500, which obviously is based on the Indianapolis 500 and everything. So, the special events, well, not the iRacing special events, but the privately held special events that try to replicate the Indianapolis 500, those fields were so tight and it was so hard to try to, get in, and you had to have everything right. And that's part of what makes it so intense, is just the level of detail that you need to be able to make the field, just the amount of work and everything. And I think if you guarantee it, it takes a lot of that drama away that, helps make the race and everything. And one thing I thought about today was, back in 1995, 1996, when all of this was going down, what if it was flipped? The situation was flipped. It was CART that was, deciding to go to standardized. Let's just say that CART was the one that was still holding the 500, not the Indianapolis Motor Speedway or the IRL, right? And CART was the one that implemented the 25-8 rule or whatever. I feel like the teams back then, I feel like they might have been okay with it, actually, because they would still be in power, right? You'd still have all the big teams that were in power back in those days, with Penske and Ray Hall and all the other teams that were
Newman
active.
Haas.
Newman Haas, yeah. So all those older teams that a lot of them no longer here. What if it was, because I think part of the reason why they were so mad about being locked out was because they would only have, CART was the big series, and they would only have 8 spots because the 25 were guaranteed to the so-called IRL teams. So if it were flipped in that situation, it was CART with the 25 guaranteed entries, and IRL with 8 entries. I feel like there's probably still be conflict, but kind of feel like they'd almost be okay with it in a way, because they would still hold the cards, and they wouldn't be locked out of competing in the race. And I think that's what it kind of boils down to, is being guaranteed to make it, and not having to worry about not being in the race and everything. But I think it does take away from the purity, I guess you could say, of running this race and everything that goes along with the tradition of the Indianapolis 500.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point you brought up with 25-8. I mean, I think about it in another way, in that only Derek Walker attempted to sent a car to Indianapolis for that race. Penske didn't send a car for that race. He had 3 cars in the US 500. Newman Haas, of course, had 2 cars in the US 500. And Paul Newman said he would never race in the Indianapolis 500 ever again. Now, that ended up changing a few years later, once things kind of settled out. Him and Carl Haas ended up coming back to Indy with one-offs, and then eventually with their team, prior to the health problems that ended up basically ending their organization. He had, I think it was a Team Green, or it was a one-car team back then. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head who was around, like Pat Patrick's team. That was another one, with Hi to My Family at Home. I mean, the point is, there was a way for the kart teams back in that day to basically end the IRL as we know it, and they didn't bother to. And when you bring up like the 25-8 rule, and if the IRL was on the low side of that, how many cars of that 25 were really worthy? The Menard cars with the late Scott Brayton, which ended up being taken over by Danny Ongaius. Tony Stewart ended up getting the pole after the passing of Scott Brayton. I think Mark Dismore or Robbie Buell was like the third car. All right. Our Harry Lunatic with Treadway. That's 4 cars. Davy Jones for Rick Gallis, who of course was racing on both sides at that point. That's 5 cars. After that, I'm like, I can't even remember. Or Buddy Lazier. Okay. With Hemmelgarn. He had been somebody who'd run Indy and run for many years. So that's 6 cars. Would there have even been an AJ Foyt? Probably, I guess, there you go. AJ Foyt would probably have 2 cars. Because after that, I'm trying to think about who the hell was in that field. I know, was it Greg Beck had a car with that Matsuda. There is, Scandia. Andy Evans had a bunch of cars in that field. Yeah, whatever. I could go back. I'm doing one of my memory these days is not anywhere near as good as it used to be. The fact that I was able to pull out that much is, I'm pretty glad. But I'll move it over to you, Josh. Speaking of IndyCar, speaking of racing in general, we talk about iRacing and gaming in the sim segment.
Of course, getting back into it, of course, and everything for this year. Ran a little bit of the Ferrari GT3 at Oulton Park. Bit of a learning experience there, so that was interesting. Ran the MX-5s at Okayama Circuit. Drove. I should have streamed that one because I screwed up. I should have won that race, but then I carried too much speed in the first corner and spun out, and then recovered, but still finished second. But probably should have won that one. But this week, NASCAR Class A Fixed Series and Open Series at Long Beach, so that's going to be entertaining to see NASCAR at Long Beach here on iRacing. So that might be fun to try out. Production Car Challenge at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course, and the Mustang GT500 only series at that as well. So definitely going to hit that one up. Gen 4 Cup at Iowa Speedway here. Formula V's at Tsukuba Circuit. Touring Car Challenge at Okayama Circuit. Spec Racers, the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America Challenge at Road America. Let's see the other series here, NASCAR Oval Series. The Draft Masters at Talladega with the 2009 COT car. NASCAR, Xfinity's at Rockingham this week. At North Carolina Motor Speedway. You have the ARCA series at Motegi here. So lots of action here this week in terms of, let's see, the news in iRacing this week happening in iRacing. I think they have their weekly challenges, of course, with the Draft Masters and Ring Masters here. So this is going to be interesting. The Daytona 500 is coming up here soonish, so gotta start getting ready for that and everything, and being able to run that again as I usually do the past couple of years that I've done that on iRacing. So definitely looking forward to doing that again and having a good run. So that's coming up, the weekend of the weekend leading up into the Daytona 500. So the real Daytona 500. So yeah, that should be interesting. I guess the actual NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series is going to do their own Daytona Clash instead of the actual Clash at the Coliseum Speedway. So that's kind of interesting seeing that. I guess definitely a little bit more entertaining, or I guess better for iRacing to be on the Super Speedway than on the Clash LA Coliseum track. So that's kind of an interesting choice there by the series and everything. But yeah, it should be interesting. Definitely going to be doing a lot, hopefully, this year. Definitely going to be preparing for the iRacing Daytona 500 here coming up. So yeah, definitely be streaming that, which, yeah, of course, Twitch TV/usailor2, and go on there and see all the streams and everything. And of course, Super Bowl week and being able to lead up into that, definitely will be talking about that on Twitter, definitely on Super Bowl game day. Be definitely retweeting who I think has good analysis of the game and all that stuff. So definitely be looking at that at JP Huffline on Twitter. So go follow there. And of course, YouTube channel at Gripship Podcast. Go there and see all our videos, which are all up there and uploaded onto YouTube. So yeah, definitely a good conversation and everything today. And, hopefully we see a good result with the 49ers and being able to see them take the title, of course. So that'll be very interesting to watch and everything, of course. And, getting back into the thick of it, of course, already with a lot of news to start out with, here in 2024 and racing. And now we just getting started. We haven't actually started the real racing yet, except for the Rolex 24 and a couple of other things. So now, next couple of weeks here, we get back into the full swing of NASCAR, IndyCar, and F1. So, ready to get into it this year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the 500 is here next week. All three major NASCAR series will start their season. You had ARCA for their demolition derby that they'll have. I forgot what day it is. So they'll be starting their season. They have a pretty big entry list too. So there'll be some probably decent cars having a chance to go home. Talking about locked in fields versus not in that case. So we'll talk all about that. Might have guests, might not. See if we can get some people we've had on before back on for the NASCAR, because it's NASCAR. We'll talk about, of course, the Super Bowl, whatever happens. I'll see if I have a voice one way or the other. You'll know what the result is, maybe based on that. In terms of that, you can find me at PGMatthew28 on Twitter. You can find me at PhilipGMatthew28 on Insta. You can find us. I mean, obviously, the YouTube page, Josh goes and uploads all the shows there, the video feeds. You can find the sound, the audio on my YouTube page. You can also find the Grip Strip podcast at PhilipGMatthew.com. Yep, we'll be back. The Daytona 500's here. We have the Super Bowl of football this weekend, the Super Bowl of stock car racing the following week. We have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as the Grand Marshal, putting over his new spring football league, amongst other things. Now he's one of the investors in the WWE now, after once upon a time being their lead dog, and now he owns a piece of it. So we'll talk about the Daytona 500, NASCAR, in more detail next week, and anything else news-wise that comes up in the world of motorsports we'll talk about here on the Grip Strip podcast. So for Josh, Phil, thanks for listening, subscribing the whole bit, and we'll see you next time on the GSP.